If you want to drop the largest amount of body fat in the shortest period of time, but keep all your muscle and strength in the process, then the aggressive mini cut is the best way to do that, but only if you do it properly. So I'm going to give you A to Z, the exact way to execute a mini cut properly, and why even do it in the first place with some important disclaimers. Now, I'm going to use science to back that up as well. So this is essentially the only aggressive mini cut video you'll ever need. With that said, we get started with the goal. Before we set up the nutrition and all that, we have to understand what the purpose here is. How long are we doing this for? 2 to 6 weeks max. 6 weeks, to be quite honest, is the absolute upper limit, but it's also pushing it for a lot of people. Mini cuts, aggressive mini cuts, are not easy to stick to for most people. If you do what I'm about to outline for you, it will be easier, but nonetheless, 6 weeks max. We are attempting during this time to drop 1.5% of our body weight weekly. So if we do the math on that, an example of a 200-pound male would be 1.5% dropped weekly. It's about 3 pounds of fat we're aiming to drop every week of this mini cut. If you're a 160-pound female, that would be 2.4 pounds you're trying to drop weekly. Keep in mind, this doesn't include the initial drop of somewhere between 4 to 7-ish pounds everybody who enters a deficit sees. The reason we lose 4 to 7-ish pounds, depending on the individual how much that is because when we get into a deficit, we drop all the water and glycogen, maybe not all, but a lot of water and glycogen that we had stored in our muscles and in our liver. This does confirm that we're in a deficit. So on top of that weight loss, we're aiming for this 1.5%. Let's say that I'm doing a mini cut for 4 weeks. As the male in this particular example, that means that I'm dropping, let's say, 5 pounds in that first week, plus the 3 that I'm aiming to lose each week of body fat. That's 8 pounds in the first week. Another 3 weeks after that is another 9 pounds, for a total of about 17 pounds dropped in 4 weeks. That's quite a bit, and it will make a drastic difference. So that's to run some numbers as to the length of time and what we're aiming for. Now, obviously, we want to retain strength and performance as much as possible during this time. So training here is going to be very important, as well as macronutrients, diet optimization. Now, the reason that people do aggressive mini cuts, the best way to do them is simply as a tool to continuously lean bulk productively. So if you've been lean bulking for a long period of time and you're noticing you have a little excess fat gain, but you want to continue, you have to continue this lean bulk. Well, have to, right? You get the point. You want to continue this lean bulk for long periods of time productively. Maybe you're experiencing some diet fatigue symptoms of being in this bulk for so long. You're eating thousands of calories and you're just getting tired of it. Okay, mini cut helps you resensitize, bring some body fat back down, get back into a lean gain phase. Now, obviously, you may also just have an event coming up soon, somewhere within 2 to 6 weeks, hopefully. And you can mini cut there because you don't want to do a full length cut, as you don't plan on actually ending this bulk when you come back, etc. These are the 2 most common best use cases of doing an aggressive mini cut. Now, with that being said, important disclaimer here. If you're looking to cut for longer than 6 weeks, in other words, you've got large amounts of body fat to lose, then click away from this video and come back to it when you are in a better position where your goal is not just weight loss. If your goal is just weight loss, this stuff is not for you. You need a standard longer cut, which I'm going to be covering with all the science later on in my channel, so you can subscribe for that. But the point is what people do is they see the mini cut and they think, oh my God, new way to just lose fat faster than the old way? No, the old way, obviously with more optimization, hopefully, the standard cut, if you will, is and will probably always be the king of getting very lean over long periods of time, losing lots of weight. The aggressive mini cut is only for the scenarios that I've just previously outlined. Do not think, oh, okay, you got a cut for 12 weeks. I'm going to do a mini cut for 6 weeks. Diet break, mini cut for... Bad idea. Bad idea. Do a standard cut instead. It's superior. Now, with that said, we're going to dive into how to set this up. Now, if any of this is overwhelming, I actually created a free mini cut manual that's also companion to this video, just to help you get it in 2 pages, summarize exactly what to do. Check that out, link in the description. Let's go ahead and start with your nutrition. So setting this up, we're going to set your calories first, obviously. And my preferred method, recommendation for this, would be setting somewhere between 30 and 40% of a deficit from your current maintenance calories. Now, another way you can do this is 500 calorie deficit per pound of fat you're looking to lose. So using the previous examples here, this 200-pound male trying to lose 3 pounds of fat weekly, we do 500 calories times 3, that's your deficit. So that would total 1,500 calories. In the case of the female, that would total 1,200 calories. All right, that's your deficit. Again, I would prefer this because it's a little bit more scalable to the individual and where they are now. This is a little bit too black and white. It also assumes that 500 calories miraculously, perfectly equates to 1 pound of body fat loss over a week, et cetera, which isn't always the case. Now, with that said, a common question here is, well, what do I know what my maintenance calories are? I have a extremely important, this will be a mind-blowing thing, so pay attention right now. There's this thing called Google, all right? And when you type into Google, you type in TDEE calculator. Just go to this one right here, for instance. Type in your stats, click calculate. You'll have a general idea, as to what your maintenance calories are right now. However, I will say this. If you don't know what your maintenance calories are at the moment, you probably shouldn't do a fucking aggressive mini cut. You want to know why? Because an aggressive mini cut can only truly be properly executed by somebody who is on top of their shit. Somebody who's actually committed and dedicated to building the best physique. Typically what that means is those individuals are tracking a lot of stuff and have been up until the point of this aggressive mini cut, which means you know what your calories are at currently to be in this somewhat of a surplus you've been in. You know roughly what your maintenance calories will be without having to use an online calculator. Keep that in mind. So that's another tiny disclaimer. This video is going to have a lot of disclaimers in it. So nonetheless, figure out and understand your current maintenance roughly and go ahead and use either of these methods to, based on your goal here, to identify what you're setting your starting calories at. Let's use a couple of scientific references here to understand that this is absolutely viable, 30 to 40%, and pull this number out of my ass. The first study, we have a 2-week aggressive deficit that showed no signs of muscle loss despite a average of 37.5% of a deficit. Here's the study in question, okay? And next is this study, 8 weeks, 24% average deficit, no negative results in performance. Now, there were 2 groups in this. There was a high protein group and a low protein group. Now, the high protein group was consuming 2.5 grams of protein per kilogram, and the low protein group was consuming 0.9 grams per kilogram of their weight, as we can see here. Now, the high protein group, despite a 24% deficit over an 8-week period of time, showed no signs of performance, hormonal, or muscle decreases, losses, but they did lose 1.5 pounds of body fat on I believe it was a weekly basis, or it may have been total. Nonetheless, they lost fat and they didn't lose muscle. That's a period of 8 weeks. It must have been 1.25 pounds lost weekly. Okay, now we'll have to double check that. Nonetheless, you can read all these studies for yourself. I will link, you can see the PMIDs right here. All right. Now, with that said, we are going to use this. We understand now that the deficit is going to be totally fine for a short duration, 30 to 40%, my preferred method. So we go ahead and set that. We're now going to set protein between 1.25 to 1.5 grams per pound of your body weight. Okay. Again, what we saw in this study was 2.5 grams per kilogram, and that equates to over 1 gram per pound of body weight, okay? So we are going to shoot a little bit higher protein. Now, obviously this is higher than the recommendation for maximum protein required to retain muscle and to build muscle, but that assumes a somewhat regular hypo, or eucaloric state. This is not a regular hypocaloric state. This is an aggressive hypocaloric state, and therefore higher protein is a good idea to cover your bases as far as muscle retention and as far as improving satiety goes. All right. Also, with that said, you want to make sure that we have to understand that there is no negative of increasing protein above that recommendation. People say, well, this is all you need for protein. There's no benefit of going over it. But I just mentioned a couple: satiety, increasing chance of muscle retention, higher thermic effect, therefore perhaps a slight increase in metabolic rate. There's plenty of benefits. If you don't have kidney issues, then there should be no harm in increasing your protein higher. I personally always am somewhere around 1.3 grams per pound of my body weight, even in a surplus. it's just probably a decent idea, better than going over in carbs, especially as you get more advanced in your training. Nonetheless, we continue here with setting our protein between 1.5 to 1.25 to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. Now, we're going to set our fats at 25% or 0.3 grams per pound of your current body weight. This is, of course, essential to ensure hormonal balance and make sure that your hormones don't get absolutely demolished. And we're going to fill in the rest of your calories with carbs. So, the example of the 200-pound male that we've been using up until now, let's assume his maintenance calories is somewhere around 3,500. Keep in mind, it could be a lot higher than this. Doubtful, but it could be lower as well. Nonetheless, we're going with a 40% deficit, maximum aggressiveness. 2,100 calories is what he's dive bombing right into. Now, from here, we're going to set our protein at 1.4 grams per pound. Well, why 1.4? Because I just wanted to set it at 1.4. We have the range 1.25, 1.5. Set it somewhere within that, all right? 1.4, I just happen to choose it. That gives us 280 grams of protein. If we times that by 4, which is how many calories are per gram of protein, that's 1120 calories that are going to come from protein out of the 2,100 budget that we've now allocated. Fats, 60 grams. How did I come up with this? I simply used the method of 0.3 grams per pound of my current weight. That gave me 60 grams. There's 9 calories per gram of fat, so it's 540 calories coming from fat total at the moment. Now, that gives us a remaining amount of calories from our total budget of 440, from which we will divide by 4 because there's 4 calories per gram of carbs, and that gives us 110 grams of carbs. So, to summarize, we now have our nutrition set up for our aggressive mini cut if you just so happen to be a 200-pound male with all these stats. Hopefully you understand it. We've got 2,100 calories in this example, 280 grams of protein, 60 grams of fat, 110 grams of carbs. Now, we need to make sure that we actually optimize our nutrition to avoid diet fatigue. The problem with aggressive mini cuts is diet fatigue is imminent, and it's likely to be severe. This is the part that differentiates people that can and do stick to their aggressive mini cuts from people that don't. First is this right here. We need to be eating 95% or more, ideally 100% nutrient-dense foods to stay full and get your micronutrients in. Again, aggressive deficit means less likelihood of, or higher likelihood rather, of being deficient in nutrients the longer that continues. So we want to make sure we're getting plenty of vegetables, plenty of lean meats, okay, healthy foods if you will. And if need be, this may be an appropriate time to take a greens powder or a multivitamin, again, just to cover your bases. Now, with that being said, we need to get adequate amounts of water, and electrolytes are going to be important here as well. Again, going back to the nutrient deficiency, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing electrolytes around the workout at the very least, okay? Now, these can be fulfilled very simply with some sort of an EAA powder with electrolytes built in, or it could be just an electrolyte powder. I can't quite remember the name of the one I have now. I believe it's Bio something, but BioSteel is the name. Or there's Believe supplements EAAs that I took that also had electrolytes in there, mixed in. I would take that during the workout. So things like that, it can go a long way nonetheless, okay? So that's going to cover your bases as far as electrolytes to a larger degree than not doing them at all. Proper sleep is key. Now, we've got plenty of studies on sleep. This one on athletes showed that sleep restriction did increase your, increased perceived effort, okay? Where is it? So it increased salivary cortisol area under the curve by 42%. Training distress increased by 84%, and session perceived exertion by 11%. So in other words, your lack of sleep over consecutive days, especially weeks, months, etc., leads to lower ability to recruit motor units, therefore making your training less effective, less efficient. And that is the last thing we want when we are in an aggressive deficit. We need to prioritize training to ensure we keep as much muscle as possible. We got to give the muscle as much of a reason to stick around, and losing sleep is not ideal. So again, that's why aggressive mini cuts are for the people that take things seriously. You're already dialed in with your tracking, etc. Your sleep needs to be prioritized in this case. If you're like, yeah, I typically get away with 6 hours, probably not a good idea. As you can see in this study, It was around a 5-hour bedtime to just above or just simply above a 7-hour bedtime. So keep that in mind. If you're going even 1-2 hours lower, you will lose a lot more fat mass. You will lose a lot more fat-free mass and retain more fat mass. And diet fatigue symptoms will hit you a lot harder. So a couple things to keep in mind as far as the sleep thing goes. Now, with that said, carbs. As we noted, carbs are going to be very limited. You're coming off of a surplus especially. Carbs are going to be down very, very low. It's just simply the nature of having to be in an aggressive deficit. So make sure that you prioritize carbs around your training session. Got a couple of papers here that show the importance of timing carbs around your session for the importance of sustaining performance during that session, especially with resistance training. So these are those papers to support the fact that, okay, if you're ever going to have carbs, it's probably best to have them around the workout. Now, obviously, you should be having carbs, but the point is the lower your carbs have to be in a case like this, the better it is to have them around your workout. So if you have 110 grams of carbs, as per the example prior, as this example shows, then probably best to have half of that before, half of that after, or 1/3 before, 1/3 during even, and 1/3 after. However you want to split it out, peri-workout's going to be ideal. Okay? So this is how we're going to optimize these things. Now, with that said, a couple more things here. First and foremost, I already mentioned tracking a few times. Now, tracking everything and training properly is going to be of utmost importance. I don't think I need to stress that any further. Make sure your training is optimized and performance is sustained as much as possible. How do we do this? Well, a few basics when it comes to training is appropriate rest times between sets, minimum 2 minutes, okay? Now, if you aren't entirely sure why or how, etc., I just made a video breaking down the 10 most common mistakes people make that keeps their training suboptimal. And I highly recommend you go watch that, okay? I'm going to be making more videos optimizing training with actual literature behind it as well. But nonetheless, just know 2-minute rest times should be the bare minimum. For compounds, 3 to 5 probably makes more sense. Nonetheless, the reason we want that longer rest time, especially in such an aggressive deficit like this, is to make sure that our fatigue is dissipating as much as possible between the sets so we can maximize each set. Speaking of sets, 3 to 10 sets per muscle group per week is sufficient to sustain most or all your gains, assuming we're taking this very close to failure, and in some cases to failure, okay? So the proximity to failure, whether it's all-out failure or 1 or 2 reps in reserve, may not be the end of the world, but it will always favor closer proximity to failure than further. So once you start getting away from 3-4 RAR, the problem there is you already aren't as accurate being that far away from failure. So muscle retention, muscle growth is always going to favor the person that trains a little bit more intensely per set. And again, we take longer rest times to ensure that. So gains maintained for 8 months. Oh, here's an important thing to understand. When we're training at this high intensity, we have seen in a paper that, so this paper specifically right here, okay, that they actually reduced training volume to 1/9 of what they were doing prior. So they had grown muscle on a certain amount of volume, these trained individuals. We have a younger group and an older group, and they actually cut their volume down for 8 months, down to 1/9 of the amount. And so we see here a 32-week period, and they actually retained basically all of their gains, okay, with 1/9 of the volume. So for a lot of people, that could just be one set, and you can maintain, again, take into high proximity to failure with the proper macros, etc. Now, dropping your volume that low when also in an aggressive deficit is not the best idea. That's why I'm recommending 3 to 10 sets per muscle group per week, because you also can't forcibly keep your volume too high. Being in such an aggressive deficit, you will simply not be able to recover the same anymore, which could get you to a point where, God forbid, you get injured or some other complications arise, or you just can't maintain your performance whatsoever because recoverability has just decreased so massively. So 3 to 10 sets per muscle group per week with adequate rest. This should help allow with that, okay? Not just adequate rest between the sets, but between workout sessions, right? Between muscle groups. Close proximity to failure. And here we have another paper which shows that whether it's failing high load or low load, very similar results. Again, this is just to reiterate the importance of training intensely, especially when in a deficit. Again, volume doesn't have to be crazy high. It's more about intensity to sustain your growth. It's a lot easier to sustain muscle growth because the total volume required to do so is not as high. However, the intensity needs to be there to give the muscle a reason to stay. Okay, and lastly, we do have the preprint of meta regressions done by Zach Robinson and colleagues here. This is a very famous one already, showing the importance of training to high proximity to failure. Okay, I'm gonna have other videos breaking all this stuff down and training to failure, if it's overrated, if it's actually required, and to what degree it's required, and so on. But for now, we understand this, okay? Now, with that said, another thing when it comes to tracking, this is so important. Track body stats daily and properly to ensure good progress across the board during your mini cut. So what does that mean? You got to track body weight every single day. Again, this should not be news to anybody that is actually seriously considering an aggressive mini cut. If you are not tracking your body weight every single day and plugging it into your phone, into an app like Happy Scale that connects to Apple Health, or into a special physique tracking app like the one I offer in our special Elite Physiques Pro members area, if you don't have something like that where you're plugging your weight in each day to keep track of trends and charts, that's going to be an issue. I'm a little skeptical about you doing a mini cut in the first place. But nonetheless, you should be doing that every single day to get your weekly trends, ensure that you're staying within the goal here. If you're losing too quickly, you can be sure that diet fatigue is going to hit you like a truck a lot sooner, and that's going to be a problem, okay? Progress photos, take them weekly. As far as the aggressive mini cut goes, I typically recommend every 4 weeks, but in this case, changes are happening much quicker. Track your nutrition daily to make sure that we're optimizing things and staying on point with it all. Track your training daily and weekly, okay? This, again, important to make sure that we're staying to the same or similar numbers as far as our performance on each set goes to retain muscle. If you're noticing strength is just flying down like crazy, that's a big problem. For sure at that point, you're going to be experiencing other diet fatigue symptoms. That is a very big red flag. When muscle strength starts declining rapidly, suddenly, for 2 weeks in a row, let's say, big red flag, all right? You got to watch out. And by the way, disclaimer coming up right now. Nonetheless, the last thing to talk about is the measurements. Just take some at the start, take some at the end, just for your own purposes, record. All of this is to gather data so you can reflect back on in the future. And if in the future you decide to do another mini cut, you can do it even better than last time. Now, real quick, if you want a streamlined system to track your body stats in a way that guarantees faster progress, so makes all this simple. If you don't have a system to actually track all this appropriately or get reminders and make sure everything's optimized, and you aren't 100% sure if your training and nutrition is optimized, then what I've done is I've made up Elite Physiques Pro program. You can try it out for 7 days free. Link in the bio for that, okay? It helps you do all of that stuff. You'll execute this aggressive mini cut with ease comparatively. Now, the last part here is perhaps the most important for a lot of people, and that is the disclaimers. We have 3. Number 1, do not use this for a long-term approach. I already mentioned this at the beginning of the video. It bears mentioning again. It's not sustainable. And it's a bad idea if you're obese or overweight. You're just looking for weight loss. Look, the goal of weight loss is a lazy goal. Don't get me wrong. If you have been overweight all your life and you decided to lose weight, that's fine. That's good, obviously. But nonetheless, a lot of people that aim for weight loss get stuck with weight loss because it's an easy goal to set. It's just simple. Just watch the number on the scale go down. Believe it or not, people don't realize how simple that actually is. However, if your goal is just weight loss, you aren't prepared to do things like this. You've hopefully now got a better understanding as to the technicality and the optimization that goes into this to ensure that it's done properly. If you don't do most or everything mentioned in here, it's not going to be optimized. The chance of you sticking to something, the chance of you sticking to this is already low. The chances now become much lower to the point where they're almost non-existent, and you're kind of setting yourself up to just hit a wall. Guaranteed crash of your hormones, lose a bunch of muscle, feel like shit, rebound, binge. Terrible things could happen. So weight loss, general good health, this is more for people after an incredible physique. Weight loss is a distinct goal perhaps that they had in the past. They understand now if they want to actually look better, perform better, and be as healthy as possible, weight loss can't be that goal anymore. If you're on that part of your journey, great, good for you. check out some weight loss videos. Check out how to cut properly. You can subscribe here. I'm going to give you some strategies on that as well. But once again, just not for you. Okay? Nonetheless, I keep saying nonetheless for whatever reason. Nonetheless, number 2, end the mini cut the second you are experiencing diet fatigue symptoms setting in significantly. So let's say that you're like, okay, cool, 6-week mini cut. Yeah, that's going to give me the best results. Let's do 6 weeks. And in week 2, you're already noticing diet fatigue massively comes at cravings hit you like a truck. I'm going to make a separate video on all diet fatigue, how to manage it, but as far as like regular cuts and what diet fatigue is, but cravings hit you like a truck, constant hunger, cognitive function declines, impairs because you can't think of anything other than food all the time, performance in the gym drops off a cliff, you're starting to look skinny, you're feeling like shit, etc., etc. I think I've already named enough for you to know if you're experiencing any of that, get off the aggressive mini cut. Even just jump on a diet break real quick, bring back to maintenance if need be. Wait it out, look around, watch the video, maybe make sure that you did everything properly. And if so, you can attempt to try it again, make sure everything is better and optimize this time. Or just stay to maintenance, recomp for a month or 2, and then get back into whatever the next goal is from there. The point is, you start noticing these diet fatigue symptoms, get out regardless of how much longer you intended the mini cut to be. It's a sign muscle loss will begin or has already begun occurring, and your hormones won't be happy either. Disclaimer number 3, finally, do not do mini cuts back to back with diet breaks in between. This is an extremely inefficient way to cut versus a standard cut done properly. Slow and steady wins the race when it comes to cutting properly to get ripped, to get truly lean. Aggressive mini cuts don't get you ripped, okay? Because getting ripped requires you to be at a low enough body fat percentage to look ripped. If you're doing an aggressive mini cut, you can only really reap the maximum benefits of an aggressive mini cut when you're starting in a higher body fat percentage. For men, let's say it's around 20. For women, let's say it's around 25 to 30. If you're starting an aggressive mini cut, you're like 13% body fat. Yeah, you'll get to 10%. You're going to lose some muscle along the way. There's just not enough body fat on you to preserve, to one, keep you satisfied at all during this time. Okay, obviously the burning of body fat is because your body's like, okay, we're freaking out here. We don't have the resources we need. Let's melt this body fat off quickly. But when you don't have all that much to begin with, it's going to start interfering with hormones. You're going to hit some nasty diet fatigue very quickly. You're going to lose muscle because the leaner you are, the more prone you are to losing muscle when in a deficit. Simple as that. Okay. In fact, the leaner you are, the less total muscle mass you can hold. Okay. Once you start getting into very lean territory, like 10% and below, you are limiting the amount of muscle you can actually hold versus 12 to 20%, for instance. So keep that in mind. If you want to understand based on science fully A to Z how to do a proper standard mini cut with the proper adjustments done, all that stuff, I will be making a video on that. So make sure you subscribe. Also, if you found this video helpful, like, share it with anybody else who you think may benefit from this. Any of your friends who want to build their best physique, who's looking to mini cut real quick in an efficient way, only to the committed people, not the fucking people that are, want a quick fix. Okay, they will harm themselves. I don't know how many times I got to say this. Probably that's definitely not enough. People still going to be, I'm going to do an aggressive. I see it all the time on TikTok. What a joke, right? So nonetheless, there it is again. That's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you understand better how to do the mini cut. Last thing I'll say as a reminder, free mini cut manual, link in the description below so that you have it with you on your phone if you want to just set things up real quick, okay? Make sure you subscribe. I got more content coming soon, including vlogs, including other stuff. And let me know what you thought about this video in this style. Very basic loom type video, long form, no editing, just raw, bringing the info, bringing the science, bringing the knowledge to you, the value. So hopefully you liked it. And if so, just do me a favor, let me know with a comment down below and I can keep making videos like this. If you prefer higher edited ones and this, that, and the other to keep your attention span, you can tell me that down below as well. I'll probably just block you because why would I want people like that watching my channel? I want serious, committed people with, decent attention spans that are here for value, are here to actually build incredible physiques, which may be the thing that requires the most discipline of all time, the most delayed gratification of all time. So if you need fancy edits to keep your mind occupied while trying to break down exactly how to do something that is part of an endeavor that is literally requires the most delayed gratification of perhaps any other endeavor, aside from maybe business, then yeah, that's probably not a good thing. So to summarize, comment down below if you liked this video, and if you don't like this video, too bad for you. You can still comment it down below, but it's not really going to matter. I think that this is just the way to bring the value, and that's what I plan on doing going forward in all of this year and ongoing from there for the foreseeable future. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you. See you guys in the next one.